Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So welcome to another new video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm on a car ride to Port Moody. First of all, going through New Westminster, crossing the Fraser River through the Petullo Bridge. I just love this charming little golden orange bridge. So this bridge, it connects the city of Surrey and New Westminster, passing by one of my favorite cafes, the Take 5 Cafe. And here we are getting closer to the city of Port Moody. Turning around and down this bridge is going to be the pretty well-known Rocky Point Park. So it's on a weekday, but the parking lot is pretty busy. This park is always attracting a lot of locals as well as tourists. So this park, as you can see, it features a wide range of mountains, the Inlet that connects to the Pacific Ocean, and this lovely boardwalk and some boats. So I just want to walk through this boardwalk first to appreciate the water and the mountains around. There's some Canada geese and ducks. And I'm very happy to be here. So this place is truly inspirational. Some boats are like unloading into the water. So finding a picnic table, and here I'm sitting down, get ready to do a panorama sketch. So I'm identifying a foreground element and start drawing that first. So it's this maple tree growing on a lawn. Drawing the trunk first, and these boughs splitting from the upper part of the trunk, and the railing of the lawn area and the rock there. And now I'm drawing this van parked on the edge of the parking lot behind the tree and the railings. There's another tree closer to the van. Now I'm starting to develop the details for this foreground tree, extending these boughs to smaller branches and twigs, and then starting to get these squiggly lines to suggest the numerous clusters of leaves making up this gigantic sphere of the tree's canopy. So just getting the rough outline done. Yeah, it's a very loose and organic sphere. And because it's in the foreground, I would like to give the tree's canopy a lot of details using these little squiggles for the leaves. And then coming down to the ground level, finish up the railings. Starting to draw the benches on the edge of the lawn. And this row of benches are slanting down towards the right because of the sense of perspective. And now I'm ready to draw these two people passing by just to give a sense of proportion. Now the tree in the foreground, it looks much taller now in comparison to the people. Alright, so moving on to the next little layer, I'm drawing these columns and the railings. So these columns are in rectangular prism shapes, and the railings, horizontally, they're going down towards the right because of the sense of perspective, and drawing the net for the lawn's railings. Now I'm drawing these extremely foreshortened benches in the distance. Yeah, and one more bench. And the fence in the far distance using loose horizontal lines. The lamppost in the middle ground. Now I'm ready to draw the pavilion at the beginning of the boardwalk, which is an iconic object at this place. So starting to draw this pyramid shape of the roof, and then there's another lamp beside it, and then some more posts of lamps and bushes obstructing part of the pavilion. The columns supporting the pavilion and the tiny person standing in there. Some more columns on the other side. And the staircase going down to the lower part close to the water, defining the size of the pyramid shape of the roof and the shingles. And I just drew another lamppost over there. It's lower than the one in the middle ground because it's more far away. Starting to draw the boardwalk, the top and the bottom of the wooden railings, and another bench closer to me on the lower right. And I think we have a 1-point perspective here, which means there's one vanishing point somewhere in the middle of the pavilion that all of these horizontal lines are going up into. Drawing this lamppost, which is pretty close to me. It's probably the tallest lamppost in this sketch because it's closer to me. Things closer to us, they always look taller and bigger. And just getting these easy vertical lines for the railings done. It's just the horizontal lines that are the most trickiest. The vertical lines are just all going down perpendicularly. And time is flowing by, slowly enjoying every moment that I'm here. It's actually pretty nice that the sky stays cloudy, so I don't have a lot of sunlight streaming down and brightening up my paper too much, glaring all the details out. So yeah, now working on the details of the boardwalk. Just love these little segments and these wooden legs on the bottom of this bridge structure. The diagonal lines connecting the bridge together and some last details on the bottom. Now I'm drawing the contour outline of one of the aisles in the distance. And I spot another lamppost on the boardwalk and continuing my contour outline of the aisles and the mountains in the far distance. These are beautiful organic contour outlines of curves. And then moving my sketchbook to the right hand side, continuing the contour outline, some bumpiness for the cypress trees standing out, and the most far distant mountains on the far upper right. The bottom of this aisle, and drawing this column. Each column is a rectangular prism shape with a little pyramid cap. And this one pretty close to me. Now I'm starting to suggest the foliage details as well as these houses on the other side of the water. Most of these trees, I believe they are cypress trees in cone shapes. And these houses, because they're so far away, they look like little square cubes of cabins. So yeah, the shapes of the houses are pretty preliminary. And then behind them, piles or layers of mostly cypress trees, kind of like fish scale pattern. And these trees, they are so evenly organized on this aisle in a very clean and neat pattern. So just getting this in, of course, using a summarizing approach, getting these trees suggested. And the ones higher up, I'm using very gentle hand pressure. Very vague forms for the trees higher up, which are more far away. And of course, when you're sketching details like a mountain or aisle full of trees, you don't have to try to draw every single tree. The ones higher up could be omitted with just white spaces to suggest a sense of distance and for the viewer's eyes to relax. Here is a look of my finished line work. It took me about 40 minutes to draw. And the sky is opening up with large pockets of blue sky. Now I'm ready to paint watercolors, starting with the sky, which is very dynamic. And I'm so excited to paint the sky. Let's get started. So I'm just going to wet the entire area with a thin layer of water using my large tip Holbein Water Brush. And I'm going to begin with the first little pocket on the upper left over here, trying to study its organic shape. It's kind of like a little triangle, or actually a trapezoid, with multiple brush marks of the gradient of cerulean blue, varying the water control within each brush mark. As you can see, I'm just keep playing with the water control of just using one color, cerulean blue, adding a few dots here and there to suggest the little pockets of sky. And the shapes of these pockets are changing every few seconds. So as you can see, I'm working pretty fast. This is so much more challenging but fun, exciting compared to working from a photo. And then just using the residue of cerulean blue, keep dragging it to get a lighter tint of cerulean. Over here, the sky is a little lighter, lower down in the sky. Same as here, wet into wet, a bit of more concentrated cerulean blue. Yeah, for a bit of variation. or color gradients. A little bit blue showing here, closer to the aisle's top. Okay, so now these clouds, as I see, they're not perfectly paper white. There's just a little bit of a sunshine yellowish tint. So this is diluted yellow ochre. Yeah, mostly just water. A tiny bit of yellow ochre paint pigment. Just wet these white cloud areas first with the sunshine tint. Now wet into wet, mixing cobalt blue and royal purple together to get this lively gray. And starting to paint the first piece of cloud on the upper left, wet into wet, a darker valley of more bluish gray on top of the wet first layer. Now, same thing for the other areas of the clouds lower down. Starting with a fairly light tint of gray, and then these stripes of shaded areas closer to the horizon, they look very foreshortened and thin compared to the shaded areas high up in the sky. The sky is actually a dome shape. The lower part, closer to the horizon, they're all foreshortened into thin stripe shapes. Now, wet into wet, a more intense gray on top of the lighter one. And the gray, the darker one that you lay on the second layer, it could be a little bit darker than you anticipate, because when watercolor dries, the tone, it tends to fade away a little bit or more, depending on the type of paper you're using. Yeah, so starting with a fairly light gray for these clouds on the right side of this landscape. And then grabbing some more cobalt blue, royal purple, and a tiny bit of green. A more intense gray. Oh, that's a lovely dog passing by. Yeah, and just boldly punching this intense shade onto these clouds to give more drama. And I had to work pretty fast before the previous layer is completely dried. I need to do this wet into wet blending technique without any dry brushing marks or hard edges of brush mark shapes. Yeah, so speed is the key, whether if you're painting on location or working from a photograph. Yeah, if you want to have nice blending shades of gray, you have to work pretty fast before the previous layer is dried. You want to have this soft, soothing blending to happen. And again, the shade closer to the horizon is a little bit flatter compared to the top. So as you can see, my brush marks are thinner and more refined on those clouds closer to the horizon, and more bold for the ones higher up in the sky. Adding some retouches of blue pockets over there. So the contour outline of that cloud is a little stronger with the help of the blue pockets outline. Yeah, so the air turbulence is pretty strong and the sky is changing pretty much every single second. And I love the challenge of, painting from this unstable situation. It's just, I learn much more from painting in real life compared to working with a static photograph. If you're just beginning, it's completely fine to practice with photos first, and then you can challenge yourself to sketch outside. Now, starting to paint the first layer for these foliage covered aisles, starting with this warm yellow-green, which is a mix of lemon green, yellow ochre, and a small ratio of lime green. Yeah, some parts the lime green is a higher ratio depending on what I see. So yeah, every brush mark is a little bit different from one another. Yeah, so just spice up the definitions of the foliage by playing with at least two types of warm greens. So because I'm doing a large panorama, it's pretty much not possible to film with my gooseneck tripod. And I want you to see the entire picture of this panorama, so I switched to a tripod and using my iPad to film right now. If you want to see my process better, you can watch this on your computer or even TV screen. Okay, now blending on a little bit of viridian green and more viridian green for this aisle on the right hand side. It contains much more mid and dark greens. Again, this is wet into wet. And that's very much it. The light and mid greens. Now it's time to push for higher contrast. Now, I'm starting to punch on these shade greens by mixing burnt sienna into viridian green, and I think I'm doing wet into moist. And also this layer is containing less water compared to the previous layer of warmer greens. That's one of the trickiest things about watercolors. If you want to have higher contrast, yeah, you need to mix a darker shade of that color. At the same time, you need to mix way less water into the paint. Yeah, make sure it's not too watery, otherwise this shade color is gonna fade away. Now adding some green turquoise for the mountains in the distance, playing with viridian green and cerulean blue mixed together. This part is pretty dramatic, the shadows of the clouds landing on the mountain tops. And yeah, the bright pockets of sunlight hitting some of the areas. And greeneries in the far distance, they could have a turquoise and bluish tint. So that's what I'm doing for the foliage areas in the very far distance. Yeah, using some sharper brush marks to define the nice division between the light and shaded areas. Okay, now ready to paint the surface of the water, the inlet. Just wetting the water area with actual water, yeah, from my water brush. Okay, so first of all, I want to paint the reflective yellow greens. The reflection of the foliage on the aisle above. So again, this is yellow green of at least 2 different kinds, a little darker shade for the bottom part of the aisle, and some leftover turquoise. The reflective colors on the surface of the water can be very interesting, and it changes once in a while according to the direction of the wind. And some more mid greens, just mostly using the leftover greens in my palette. Switching to my medium tip water brush for some more refined lines of ripples. Blue turquoise. So when I began the first layer of the water, I used a very diluted version of greens and turquoise. And for these sharper brush marks of ripples, I'm using a more concentrated version of greens and blues. Yeah, so that's the trick for painting water. It's not that difficult. It's always fun. And to make some parts of water shiny, make sure that you don't overpaint. So there should be always a nice balance of extremely light blue, green, and turquoise, as well as extremely dark blues and turquoise in pretty sharp contrast. So sit back and buffer a little bit before moving on to the next step. So now I want to paint these mountains in the far distance, and they look so blue. And this is a mix of cerulean blue and cobalt blue. A little bit value transition, so the peak areas are more intense compared to the lower part of the mountains, according to what I see. Again, every situation could be different. It's not always the same look for mountains. And now ready to paint the foreground area, starting to get the super diluted yellow ochre in for the sun-kissed areas. Okay, so now I'm ready to let the underpainting to dry. While waiting for that, I think I'm ready to paint the maple tree in the foreground, as usual, starting with various kinds of yellow greens. This one is more of a golden yellow green containing a lot of yellow ochre and lime green. And on the bottom 30% of the canopy of the tree is mostly viridian green, wet into wet. Yeah. Because this is a foreground element, it needs sharper contrast in terms of brush marks as well as light and shade. So now adding some pretty dark shade greens by mixing burnt sienna into viridian green and a tiny bit of cobalt blue to even intensify the shade of green, using slightly choppy brush marks wet into moist. So the brush marks are preserved and not completely faded out. And now it's time to add up the contrast for things in the middle ground and in the background area. As you can see, I'm adding some stronger tones of green. So as painters of whatever medium we're all always trying to push for higher contrast, and so our pictures are looking even more compelling. Yeah, so I added some more green turquoise, more concentrated, which means containing less water, bold brush marks. Now I need to sharpen up the foliage definition for the aisle on the right hand side. And I'm gonna go ahead and be bold using a lot of pretty large punches of brush marks to show the little organic cones standing out from the hill. Again, these are very concentrated viridian green mixed with burnt sienna. Every brush mark is a different kind of dark green and or value of green. So another brush mark could be less concentrated, more watery. If they're the same intensity, in other words, the same value, all of these trees are going to be standing out from the same distance. But in reality, all of these trees are at different distances from us. So some maybe kind of faded out a little bit of a lower color intensity. The trees painted with more intense green brush marks, as I feel they are closer to me, bulging out more from the hill. Yeah, and these foliage details closer to the right edge of my paper, yeah, it could be less sharp. The ones here, yeah, I think is bulging out the most, closer to me, so just making those little cone trees a little sharper. I think these are cypress trees, very common in the Greater Vancouver area. And some of these trees are in more intense greens. It's also because they could be catching some shadows from the clouds above. If you observe nature very carefully, clouds, they could, leave a dark shadow on the things below the sky, which is really cool. Now it's time to add some warm colors for the roof of the pavilion using leftover brown, yellow-green for the lawn here in the front. So moving on, I think I want to paint the trunk and branches of this maple tree, starting with a pretty light tone of brown, and then shade it with like darker brown. The other side is more illuminated than the other, just so showing very effectively of the cylindrical shape of the trunk. Same for the roof of the pavilion and other brown areas that I see around in the front and the middle ground. And these warmer colors of browns and yellow greens are actually pretty good balancing out the darker green shades. So again, when I'm painting everything, I always like to consider the balance of warm and cold colors as well. Yeah, so these browns are generally warmer than the greens and turquoise and blues. And adding some final polish here and there, some little dots and gaps that I forgot to paint, using mostly leftover colors in my palette. So the leftover colors in my palette is actually very handy or convenient that I don't have to mix some little bit of colors from scratch. Okay, almost there. Here we go. And here is the look of my finished sketch. It's a very ambitious panorama. Here I am, very happy, very satisfied with the result. And it took me 1 hour and 45 minutes to draw and paint and film everything. Yeah, so the weather pattern in Vancouver these days is usually cloudy or rainy in the morning and then brighter in the afternoon. So thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for weekly updates. So I try to update my channel with about 2 new videos every week. And now it's time to go home through the Pachulo Bridge. So we're kind of stuck in the traffic jam a little bit. And the Port Moody Bridge, crossing the Fraser River. Bye everyone, see you next time.